I have the answer to this question, anyhow, and this answer is the following. Let me come back to some 9 years ago, when the victory of democracy in Ukraine as a result of Orange Revolution brought about a new democratic country to the family of European nations. Was the reaction of the European Union adequate? The answer is no. And let us imagine what might have happened if the European Union have changed its failed policy of so-called European neighborhood policy, including Northern Africa and countries of what is now referred to as Eastern Partnership countries, if they will be offered, and in particular Ukraine, democratic Ukraine, be offered the perspective of membership. So probably we would not have had these 4 years of dictatorship and finally the use of force. But this is probably. So is the reaction of the West, having in mind under the West term, European Union and NATO on one side and the United States on the other side? To my mind, the answer is not that definite as in case of after Orange Revolution. The answer is yes and no. Yes, because the European Union was consistent throughout these 4 years in trying to bring Ukraine back to democracy road. And we are grateful to the European Union and its institutions for this consistency. We are grateful to the reaction of the European Union with regard to Ukrainian criminals who used to be in power and those who unleashed the aggression against Ukraine, I mean in Russia. But let me remind you that it took us 2 years to convince both the European Union and the United States to impose personalized or targeted sanctions against the dictatorial regime in Ukraine. So probably those sanctions were late. But this is probably. And in this regard, it seemed to me that there is a kind of uncertainty in the reaction of the European Union. So my question mark is why the European Union was ready on 29th November in Vilnius to sign the association agreement with a dictator and all of a sudden didn't have enough political will to sign this same agreement with the new Ukrainian democratic authorities. So this is the question mark to our colleagues from the European Union. So what was referred to as a political part of the association agreement, to my mind, also is not a political part of the association agreement. What about the chapter about, judiciary, democracy, and security? Isn't it a part of the political, or so-called political part of the association agreement? Obviously it is, for me at least. Well, the sectoral agreement, the fight against corruption, isn't it a part of a so-called political part of the association agreement? To my mind, it is. But why? Why the European Union did not dare to sign this agreement as a whole with Prime Minister Yatsenyuk and instead signed a so-called political chapter? Wasn't it because the European Union was afraid of infuriating Russia? I have the question. And I think that probably somebody in the European Union was following the logic of the arguments of Russians, that there is no legitimate power, legitimate authorities in Ukraine. That's why we have to postpone the signature until the time the president of Ukraine will be, elected, and thus the legitimate authorities will emerge in Ukraine. So to my mind, this is a wrong logic, because the right logic was and is that we still have a legitimately elected parliament of Ukraine, which is illegitimate. Nobody challenged this. This legitimate parliament of Ukraine has elected legitimate government of Ukraine. So two branches of executive power are legitimate. So one may question the legitimacy of another branch of power, executive power, that is the head of state. But it is according to the Constitution of 2004, that since if there is no president, the Speaker of the Parliament is executing his powers. So what is wrong with the legitimacy of authorities in Ukraine? Nothing. So that's why I think that this was a mistake on the part of the European Union not to sign the whole agreement with Prime Minister Yatsenyuk. And well, since my colleagues from this panel already have covered everything important, I have nothing but to follow the guidelines prepared by the organizers. And among those guidelines, the relationship between the European Union and Eastern partners. So it seemed to me that it is symbolic that at this panel, the distinguished representatives of two countries, Poland and Sweden, have got together. And this is a symbolism because Sweden, and in particular Carl Bildt, personally, and Poland initiated the, what is now being known as Eastern Partnership policy of the European Union, which to my mind was much more right policy, designed in conceptual policy designed by the European Union as compared to the so-called Eastern neighborhood policy. Ukraine is not a neighbor of Europe, or European neighborhood policy. Ukraine is not a neighbor of Europe. Ukraine is in Europe. So that's why it was a wrong conceptual approach towards Ukraine. But I think that this was very important decision by both, initiative by both Poland and Sweden to design a new conceptual policy of the European Union towards its Eastern partners. So, and I think that there is a future in this policy. The partners are different, but they will definitely benefit, and they have already benefited from this Eastern Partnership policy. And I'm very grateful to the representatives of these two countries, Poland and Sweden, and in particular to Carl Bildt. Thank you.